Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world, but welcome to BITPodium, Episode 2, The Age of Social Business. And we have some of our crew members that couldn't be here last week. First, I'm Simone Jo Moore. Hopefully you've seen Episode 1 and you will have been introduced to Monsieur Billing as well, sitting there in Sweden on client site. Hopefully, Daniel, you'll be able to stay with us and that the Wi-Fi holds out.
I haven't checked the agreements for the communication here, so hopefully. Otherwise, I will raise a ticket.
And to our other crew members, a quick snapshot bio, Mr. Aale Roos.
Hi, yeah, I'm Aale Roos from Helsinki, Finland. And I've been on the Top of the World podcast earlier, so this is now an interesting continuing thing. And well, I've been in the ITSM world quite a time, and one of my most controversial points have been unlearning ITIL, so you might have heard about that. But yes, I'm interested in ITIL. ISO 20000 and especially customer service and support. Thank you.
Wonderful. It's good to have you aboard, Aale.
Thank you.
And Monsieur Dave van Herpen, your snapshot bio, please.
Okay. Well, I'm Dave van Herpen. I'm calling in from the Netherlands, and I have been working in ITSM for quite some years now, also, and for the past 4 or 5 years, mainly active in applying agile and lean principles and instruments within that services area, which means that basically all I do is more like being an organizational consultant, an organizational advisor who happens to be in IT, and that's one of the things I love about my job right now.
Well, welcome to your first episode as a crew member.
Okay, thanks.
Now, Daniel, anything to add before we move on to our special guests?
No, I don't think so. I really looking forward to having, because it's a world premiere for us having guests, so really looking forward to this episode.
It is really good. How did you find the feedback from the previous episode?
From the so to say the social feed, it has been quite calm actually. I had a couple of emails directly, which enjoyed our session, but I mean, this is a bit of a new forum, and I think we are now trying to maneuver where we want to put our focus at. So I think they will be slightly entering to the world of ITSM, of course, but maybe we should now with Dave here as well have more focus on culture and organization and the working habits. So really looking forward what this is taking us.
Yeah, we certainly do encourage anyone to listen to the first episode as well, which talks a little bit more about our intent in moving more into the business world and getting the viewpoints and the practical side of what how the business can live with IT. And that's BITPodium's tagline, business living with IT. So first of all, I have a special guest that's been visiting here with me in France. He's on holiday, but yes, he is here. Mr. Tristan Boot, who was one of my fellow crew members when we were on the ITSMFNZ podcast. So welcome, Tristan.
Thank you. It's great to be here, eating your food and drinking your wine.
Leave the money on the fridge.
Yeah, no. No, it's great to be here. I'm really looking forward to seeing what you're doing with this format, actually, because we've been talking a little bit south of here about what we're possibly going to start up as well. So I'm really going to be following this with interest. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm the president of ITSMF New Zealand, working as a service owner at present at Vodafone, which is all fun. You know, it's got that link between business and IT, which I really enjoy. And I guess my focus, the things that I really like doing and driving are, again, the cultural side of things, and that really giving that focus on our people and making sure that we truly value them. Because I still believe we talk about that all the time, but don't actually put it into action.
It'll be very interesting to see where it all goes.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. And finally, to the reason we're actually doing this particular podcast is Mr. David Favelle, who, yes, was French very, very, a few centuries back. And after going all medieval on Tristan here yesterday, and speaking of medieval, social, business, and IT. So, David, please, a snapshot bio of who you are and what ValueFlowIT is about.
Okay, thanks. Thanks very much, Simone. I feel very privileged to be your first special guest on the BITPodium podcast. My history in IT management consulting goes back to '98 when I joined. I was one of the first consultants to join Pink Elephant in Australia in '98, and was an ITIL consultant trainer. Became a Prince 2 consultant and trainer. Did various things there until we started our own business, LucidIT, in 2001. I got involved in governance as well via COBIT, and so I've kind of worked across the life cycle in lots of different things. And so when I sold the LucidIT business to a company called UXC out here, I decided to start another one, which was about getting the whole operating model for IT sort of working across the life cycle and filling in some of the bits that that ITIL left out. So I'm sort of working with Scaled Agile and Lean and those sorts of things, and continuing on being involved with ITIL, etc. So probably more sort of taking a holistic view these days across the life cycle, and also taking into account the cultural and leadership issues in the organisation as well. So a lot of fun, and more recently have sort of gotten interested in SocialIT and what that could be in terms of potential. Just to preface what I'll probably talk about here is that it's not there yet. We've got some good ideas, and it kind of challenges a lot of the way the conventional wisdom around some of our support processes, etc. And so I'm looking forward to some interesting discussion around how we go about breaking down some of the approaches that we have that are probably a little threatened by the idea of everyone being in the room at once, which you can do on social, which you couldn't do with a call system, for example. So there's some interesting possibilities for us to explore. So
barring the technical difficulties, of course, of connecting. So you're actually almost answering the first question that we had for you. So how important a development has SocialIT actually been for business?
Well, I think if you look at what's happening in business itself in terms of the way social has kind of invaded the channels of doing business. So most businesses are multi-channel now. There's lots going on. But if I look around IT down here in down under, still not seeing much. There's a glimmer. There's a glimmer. I see.
Agree with that.
Yeah. Yeah, so the work that I'm doing for a lovely piece of work with a client down in Melbourne at the moment, and I've seen webcams pop up on the tops of people's machines, and I discussed that with one of the application developers this morning, and he was saying that they now, when they're talking about enhancements, application development tasks, because they're an Asia Pacific organisation, they connect together with webcams, and so they have those sorts of interactions, quite modern compared to how we would have once done it, sort of flying people around. But actually doing social in an incident, for example, now of course there are lots of tool vendors now that will tell you how that's possible, etc. But the reality is that the people are, so there's a couple of barriers. Well, there's lots to talk about here, but there's a few barriers, and a lot of it, I think, we've got a current state in terms of how we view IT and our paradigms, all of us on this call probably, about how support works. Level 1, level 2, level 3. We take a call through this one channel called the phone, and we open a new call, we triage it, we decide whether it's an incident or request, and then we send it down this supply chain or this sort of fairly traditional process-centric view, and with the handoffs and service levels and OLAs, that kind of instantiate or lock those sorts of views in. It's kind of not how social works in some ways. And where I'm seeing social work really well in the business is where it's. I had a call to Jetstar the other day because my flight was cancelled and I had to rebook myself.
No.
And I thought, this surely not. Surely not. it was a bit windy, and you know so they delayed a few flights, and so I called Jetstar, and I got some chap in the Philippines, and it worked remarkably well, because in that case it was a one-on-one interaction with somebody who could actually solve my problem. Now in IT we've got a bit of a different world, because if I call somebody, I've typically got a number of different people that I need to engage before I get to my resolution. And so social can sometimes, and there's a number of barriers sometimes to making these things work because of the sort of traditional approaches that we use.
I might throw it out to the crew and say, well, what's been your experience of seeing how social has taken a hold in the business side and thereby forcing or impacting or encouraging IT to actually pick up using social channels as support or just as general communications, or even having the high-level strategic conversations?
I think that you really hit the spot there with Simone with the strategic decision, because my experience so far with most of my clients is that they just see social as another channel in. So, okay, we have replaced now phone calls with chat, or we have replaced our emails with a Facebook feed. So they just see this as another channel for communication. I think that's where it actually breaks, because you're suddenly limiting or actually removing everything around collaboration within social, where you actually have the real value of actually both having a two-way communication, or actually multi-line communication, as well as you have the possibility to have a more diverse kind of conversation. So from a communications point of view, I think it's a strategic decision that makes the difference if this will just stay as a single line communication, or if we use this as a collaboration channel on a more broad horizon.
I was speaking at this actually in Sweden at the service desk conference last month, and I asked there a question which I've been asking all my audience, is that how many of you are using social media as a professional tool? And I realized that we are a very, very small minority. For most people, social media is just, you know, talking with their friends, and they have it's difficult for them to think that they could use it in a business way. And I think I have seen more business people using outside IT, I mean, using social media already in some sense as a business tool. But for IT people, it seems to be rare here in Finland and in Sweden, and actually everywhere where I've been able to ask that question.
No, I completely agree. I've seen exactly the same thing in New Zealand. I think the business side of it is picking up and being used as a I guess a mass communication tool, but also to get that feel from what's happening out there. Not actually necessarily to get direct feedback in. We I think, as Daniel said, in IT we look at it as another channel, and if it's another channel, it can always fail just to come straight into the service desk. But I think the value is to actually, as I said, to get kind of the overall feel of what's happening out there, and that's where I've seen businesses really using it quite effectively, and then being able to respond to that at a larger level.
Mr. Van Herpen, what's your opinion?
Yeah, I hear what Aale was saying as well, because I think it's not only about social media. If you talk about social IT, it's also about talking to your friends and all the other people in your office. It was a few weeks ago when we had an outage of our internet functionality on our mobile phones. So our telecom provider was we could have phone calls, but we couldn't have any internet, and that led to the situation where we were at the lunch table, and I was sitting next to someone else, and I was discussing, well, we have an outage and I have a problem, I can't reach the internet anymore. and the person next to me put it on Facebook because she did have some kind of connection, and on Facebook some other guy just indicated, well, you have to change that and that setting, and I immediately did it, and I got a workaround. So it's a combination of being social with friends and a combination of using social media.
But the collaboration is then proved by that very situation.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. David Favelle, a question. You recently held a number of workshops with HDAA in Australia about managing the floodgates for social support. So what was the audience's response and understanding or usage around working with the business in using social?
There was interesting feedback. I think it was 4 workshops that we did. There were some organisations that were actually using social internally within the IT function, so as sort of to swarm onto calls and those sorts of things, and you know, they were doing some pretty interesting stuff. But it's very early days; it hasn't sort of jumped the chasm yet. But some of the early experiences, and people were asking questions and saying stuff like, you know, can I have people on chat and the phone? You know, so how does that work? Can they handle multiple channels? And that's a very interesting concept, because your ability to make yourself understood verbally versus your ability to handle the text sort of nature of chat, it's not necessarily the same people that are going to be great at both, and yet you can't resource up a new function to say, okay, here's my chat team and here's my call team. It wouldn't even be useful. It's just a bit of a challenge for people to get their heads around. Actually, I just wanted to follow up one of the points from earlier as well, is that one of the things I think that we see with the advent of social inside IT is the same challenge that has seen the idea of DevOps arise, which is Dev and Ops didn't talk to each other before, and now all of a sudden things like Agile mean we've got to move at a faster cadence. We've got to get stuff done quickly. So this thing called DevOps arises, and it's all super interesting. And hang on, those people were always supposed to talk to each other. Our IT processes, by their nature, create silos of first, second, and third level. And social can challenge that and say, hang on, you can just invite somebody into a chat. Oh, but how am I going to be noted in the reports that I resolved this from third level, you know, because I just came into the chat and I had a few words, but you know, I didn't get the pat on the back and for being the clever guy. So it actually threatens some of the fabric that we have inside the IT function, and I think we have to recognise that and have a bit of fun with it, you know, and approach this in a way that's nice and open and easy for people.
Yeah. And I think too that if you know, because the whole idea is that we want to move and become not just engaged with the business, but actually part of the business, not just what's happening inside IT or inside finance or HR, etc. Do you think that business itself, obviously with sales and marketing, they seem to be further ahead in the social game than anyone else, but do you think that business is actually further ahead of IT in the adoption of social tools? And therefore, IT is actually, you know, like the feet of the duck under the water, paddling like crazy, even though they might look calm on top.
I've actually, I carry a second set of business cards for a company called Digital Infusions, and so I've done some work in the business with marketing departments, etc., and got a sense for how that's going in some organisations. And I think the retail industry, where they're using that as a very serious sales channel. There's good insight in banking, financial services sector. There's pretty reasonable insight, and so there's some real stuff going on there. Real revenues being generated, real business process going on. But if you look at supply chain type businesses or distribution type businesses, the business processes are not yet socially enabled. You will see that, and all of the major vendors, SAP, Microsoft, etc., are going down that path of putting social capabilities into the business process tools that people use. And so we will become more of the fabric in the business process. At the moment, I'm not seeing that so much. It's more at the interface to the client, so that to their external clients, their consumers, and those sorts of things. And again, the comments earlier, what's happening in the IT function, as we're seeing it at the interface, not so much across the business processes that support that. And yet, if we talk lean, Dave Kerben, you know, the voice of the customer, like, how would I get stuff done as quickly as possible? What I really want is to get the expertise as close to the customer as possible to resolve things as quickly as possible for the customer. But it goes against our nature as first level, second. I've hit this point 3 or 4 times now already, so it's becoming a theme. We're challenging ourselves in IT to sort of say, hey, you know, the ITIL books are not changing anytime soon. Neither is ISO 20000. There are people that are going to have to move first on these things and figure out, well, how do we do this differently so that we can get the resolution faster for the client, to get the fixed on first rates up without necessarily recognising people in the same way that we have historically.
Okay, so we've brought up some of the challenges and some of the things that are happening. How is this moving forward? What are some of the, and I'll throw this, you know, David, you first of all, but then open it right up to the crew and say, well, what do we actually need to do to be able to evolve with the SocialIT and help the business succeed? Okay,
so I'm going to hit this from 2 directions. Now, I did a study of all the Magic Quadrant tools from Gartner, you know, like all the ITSM tools, and every single one that was in the Magic Quadrant has social capability now. Every single one of them. Now, a lot of people are stuck on the old versions, but the tools, and if I go back to the ITIL world back in the late 90s when I first started looking at tools, they were not ITIL on the inside, right? They reskinned them, they did all sorts of things to try and make them look like ITIL. Most of the tool vendors couldn't keep up. But now we've got all these social tools, you know, like it's all there. The tooling is not so much the problem. I think we've actually got to figure out how do we socially enable our IT management processes. How do we do that? Write some white papers, get some of these podcasts going, get some community activity going that actually addresses these things, because there's some good theory out there, there's some good insights from the business, and it's going to be led in a different way than ITIL was already written down in the 1990s, right? The clever folk at the then CCTA wrote the books, published 44 of them, and there it is, off you go. Now, we're at this stage of this is disruptive, and it's disrupting our mental models, our paradigms for how IT needs to be managed. And so there's going to be some leadership required of people like, you know, on this call to say, you know what, it can work, and it can work like this. And here's a couple of organisations I've seen that have experimented with it. And here's a case study. And at the next ITSMF conference, we're going to give some preference to some of these things and get some real panel discussion happening to get some because it's not going to be led out of the UK or by Axelos or by anybody else. I'm not saying it anyway. So I think the way forward is community-led forums. Hey, maybe out of social media. Here we are. Long answer. Apologies.
But that's all right. What would the if we have an initiative here for social business within the sales marketing departments, for instance, how do you think that would actually affect the enterprise collaboration? So will it still stick as a social business only for doing sales and marketing, so like branding value as well as sales, or does it actually have an impact on enterprise collaboration as well?
Absolutely. In fact, I've worked on a model called Digital Strategy Framework with 4 pillars, and has a client experience part, which is the customer-facing piece. There's a worker enablement stack, which is what are the various ways that social could be used to enable all of the workers and our productivity as individuals. Then there's the operational processes, where how do we socially enable all of the operational processes in a business. And the 4th stack is the business's operating model. How can we iTunes our business to sort of turn it inside out and disrupt the competition? So there are some emerging digital frameworks, and I've been part of creating a couple that actually could help the business see social as an enabler, a strategic asset across the whole business. And even in IT, you can look at it the same way. So how do we engage with our customers? How do we work with our processes? How could we reinvent our IT model? And Simone, you might remember for the HDAA, I talked about the multi-channel IT support model, where you just bust it all up and do it differently. Okay, this is how we use live feeds. This is how we use chat. This is how we integrate video. This is how we use physical desks. This is how we bypass the service desk to create hard-connected or social communities of user groups for particular software, for example. So we have third level and the business, super users all connected together. You don't need service desk can be an active participant, but not be a gate.
My key was the point you made earlier about if we bust things open, as you say, and decide to, cut the curtains into a new fabric, so to speak, that the skill sets, it's the capability and skill sets that many of our people don't know how to use these on a practical level. They're socially inept is not a good phrase, but in some cases that's exactly what it is.
Well, they are IT people.
I
might disappear now.
Hang on.
I would agree that there's really a need some new best practice on how to use social. I've seen good cases, and one of the things which I think has been quite an interesting observation that I've heard from many IT people that they have realized that their customers are talking corporate internal IT matters on their internal social media before the service desk has, and actually the service desk has no role there, doesn't take part, but the discussion is already ongoing, and we would need really best practices to help the IT to solve how to get in, how to start using it in a good way. I mean, there are good cases, I know, but we should have more best practices, really. Yeah.
If you have any of those links to any white papers from the whole crew, if you have any links to any of these white papers or anything, we can put them in the show notes.
I have the Service Desk 2.0, which is available, where are some interviews and cases.
So, Mr. Van Herpen, what is your thoughts on all of this?
Before, I really need to drop out now, so I really hate leaving this interesting conversation, but I wish everyone a really nice evening or a beautiful day. So, and let's catch up on episode 3.
Absolutely. Okay, you enjoy your day, Daniel.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye, Daniel.
Okay, so David.
What you see happening is that because it's already happening, it's not something that we see in the future. It's already happening right now. That that support has moved towards. I heard David mention the first, second, and third line. But support is moving towards the 0 line, where actually all support has already been picked up by the business and the users themselves, because they're organized in a certain way. So also the role of the service desk is moving from being reactive to calls from users or mails from users towards scouring all the social media and all the channels where the users are and all the spots where the users are, and being part of those networks in order to spot potential problems or potential incidents or potential stuff that might be interesting to the IT organization, right? To help the network and to help the users, etc. So it's far more a proactive obligation that we have instead of the reactive duties that we were used to do.
Well, we're there to help the business succeed. That's the point.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, I think, guys, as part of, we'll start winding some things up. So, Aale, your final thoughts around the topic?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's happening, and IT is not moving it. We are not leading it. We are more like following it, and it's not a good thing. I think this would need us to produce some good knowledge and advice for people to help them.
And Mr. Van Herpen, some of your final thoughts?
Yeah, if you look at people that, because most of us are from the ITSM world, I see ITSM as the organizers of IT. What we need to do is make sure that the way that IT is organized in order to cope with this social aspect more and more, it should change. And so looking at processes, but also competences, etc. We need to change that view that we have right there. I love the way that David mentioned DevOps, because that's also something that came to my mind, thinking about if you look at what is really social IT, it's about collaboration, and collaboration is about combining the several disciplines within one area.
Yeah.
So DevOps is a brilliant example of social IT. But we're not naming it social IT, but actually it just is. So we have to take a different perspective and not only look at social media, but the whole organizational aspects.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Okay, Tristan, your final thoughts on this?
So yeah, I think it's very clear that we're still following as IT, and I think the key point that I've taken out of this that I hadn't really thought about is that I know we always, it's almost that hero culture. I've got to finish the. We've got an extra guest. I've got to finish the. It's if I don't have my name on the end of that call, it doesn't count. And that, I think, there's a really fundamental change on how we actually, I guess, report against this stuff that I'd never really considered. That is, maybe there is I think white paper is a great idea around some of that stuff.
So, Monsieur Favelle, it's your topic. What are some of your final thoughts?
A couple of final thoughts. I liked what Dave van Herpen was saying about the service desk is really changing, and its role can change quite a bit to being an enabler instead of just an order taker of all of this incident stuff that just comes at you all of the time. And I had a chat with a CIO about that recently, and the idea of a single point of contact, I said it's an old idea from 20 years ago. Why do we need that idea anymore? Does that serve us well anymore? Maybe peer support is a better idea. Maybe being an enabler for peer support is a better idea. So I think we've got to challenge the conventional models. That's the first thing, and let go of our fears around that sort of stuff, because we've made a living out of being good at advising people about that and all of that sort of stuff. We've got to let go of a little bit of our mental models around that. And the second thing, and I think again, it's been mentioned by a few people on the call, we've got to get better at change in IT. There's just been this broadening gap between the business's expectations and requirements and IT's cadence of change, being able to keep up with that. We've got to get much more change aware and change enabling as a discipline or as a practice of IT. We've just got to get better at that stuff, because it's and not seeing it as such a big thing. I'm reading a book on Kaizen at the moment, and lots of little changes add up to big change, So try something. What's the smallest thing that we could do that would move us in the right direction, teach us something about this that would enable us to continue to move forward and to sort of roll a snowball up the hill? Because at the moment it looks like we've got to try and move mountains, but it's not necessarily how we have to go about it.
Yeah. I like the idea of just starting in one team and then, moving it out to another, and then start getting those teams talking, and then so on. And I think that, it will just hopefully be subtle rather than a tidal wave and happen faster. Well, David Favelle, thank you so much for joining us on this talk. I think it's something we'd like to revisit, say, in another 3 or 6 months, because by then I'm hoping to see that we have actually seen that movement forward. And I think it's something that's not going to go away, right? So.
Well, just one more point. I'm actually in the middle of an implementation of a new operating model with a client at the moment, and I'm looking to have a multi-channel model to address Asia-Pacific issues, and I'm looking to integrate video, social, because they're a small organisation that's got to service a big footprint. So I've already got the design principles in the operating model, and I'll be able to report back on that. I've called it a 12-week capability sprint, so in 12 weeks.
Okay, well, maybe we'll have to come back with that one and just see what the results were like, and give our audience some practical do's and don't do what I just did.
I'm also in the middle of setting up a Service Desk 2.0 model, which is, not single point contact and very social in it, but it's not going to happen that fast. So this
Well,
is a little larger organization. It's a longish project, so it will take me some time before I hopefully can report some success with it.
Well, speaking of that, so as a little proverb of the week that Daniel started last week, for this week I have one of my favorites, Oscar Wilde. I just love the fact that this guy disrupted anything and everything he possibly could, and he said that success is a science. If you have the conditions, you get the results. So quite an interesting thing. Our audience, please visit bitpodium.com on the website. All your wishes, requests, and praises are welcome. There is a variety of personality and guests that we have, and one of those guests could be you. So if you've got a question, suggest a topic, or share your particular passion and view, we would love to hear about it. And especially if they are non-IT business guests as well. So anyone from HR, sales, marketing, finance, any part of the business, we would love to talk to you about how your business lives with IT. Our next scheduled live netcast is the 7th of July, so we look forward to seeing you all then. Thank you, Aale. Thank you, Dave van Herpen. Thank you, Tristan.
Thank you
for being on here while you're on holidays. And, of course, thank you, David Favelle, very much. And we'll see you all later.
Thanks.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.